Welcome, everybody, to the RotoWire Fantasy Baseball Podcast. I'm Jeff Erickson. Today is Thursday, May 13th, and I am here with RotoWire's very own Erik Halterman. You can follow Erik on Twitter at Erik, E-R-I-K _Halterman. And Erik does a lot of good stuff for us, including the RotoWire Barometer. He is part of our rankings crew for the consensus rankings. I'm not sure if consensus is the right word, but a set of 4 rankings we all compiled together. He also does a lot of KBO coverage for us. He did a great tutorial on how to use the Optimizer. He does a lot of things for us, a lot of breaking news as well. Erik, welcome. What's going on?
Yeah, nice to join you. Enjoyed working next to you on those roundtable rankings, various spots.
Roundtable, that's it.
Yeah, that's the word you're looking for. Excited to be making my podcast debut here.
Yeah, and you do a lot of podcasts on the KBO side, so it's not like you're a stranger to the mic. In fact, you just invested in new equipment, so all good.
Yeah, you can see every pore this morning, every little hair. Make sure I shave perfectly.
Lucky us. All right. So let's jump right into the breaking news. There's all sorts of stuff to discuss. It is Mariners Day. Both Kelenic and Gilbert going to make their debut. I'm super excited about that. What should we expect? Let's start off with the Jared Kelenic side. Let's get your take on him.
Yeah, I mean, he's an interesting one because the projections really are incredibly unconvinced, yet every prospect guy in the world absolutely loves him. I think when there's that much consensus, you have to assume that the projections just aren't quite equipped. I think, this is a year where that's probably going to happen quite a lot because the projections weren't set up to miss an entire season of minor league play. So I think there's a lot of guys that just don't have that track record in the upper minors that we've just never seen anything like it. So if you're someone like me who I think leans a little bit heavier on the projections than average, I think you missed out on him. Unfortunately, I don't think I have him anywhere, but that doesn't mean I'm not excited. I think I just got a little bit scared of seeing, an 88 WRC plus or something like that. I know with any young guy, you're betting on the 90th percentile. That's the reason you go for him, is because when it works out great. So I think on the whole, I'd say I'm nearly as excited as everybody else, but it's a little bit tough seeing numbers that are, like Ben Gamble territory on the projections there.
Right. Well, some of that might also be playing time too. I think that's part of the issue is like, how much time were you going to give them? When did you expect the Mariners to give them the call? Honestly, they should have given him the call right away. We all know that, but let's not belabor that point because it's already done. I've got him at 16 homers and I think 15 stolen bases, 17 and 15, I think. Pretty healthy as far as that goes. So we'll see if he lives up to that expectation. If he does, where would that put him for you?
Yeah, let's see. Where was he taken among outfielders? He was taken as 54th, but that's with that playing time that he, the playing time questions in April, which are already gone. Right. You got to jump him. I don't know, where's a top 30th outfielder was Chris Bryant, but he's having a great year. Dom Smith was 29. Will Myers, 32, maybe somewhere vaguely in there as a guy with some power and speed. And we're not entirely sure about what the average is going to be. So somewhere roughly like that is, I think, the default expectation. With obviously, again, the reason you get him is because if it doesn't work out, you just let him go. But if it does, he's way above that. Right.
And, he's up for, unless barring like just an utter collapse, he's up to stay. Unless he's, I'm trying to think of who's Domingo Santana. When he got called up by the Brewers, his first stretch was like 9 out of 10 strikeouts. If it's that bad, okay, well then you'll get it sent back down. That's possible, but highly unlikely.
Yeah, he doesn't have serious strikeout issues either. I'm not seeing any strikeout rate above 26% in the minors, so I don't think there's much reason to believe he just can't make contact.
Right. So how about Logan Gilbert? Because as opposed to Kelenic, everybody Kelenic was drafted in every single NFBC main event league. Gilbert, on the other hand, is available in pretty much all of them, I would think. I take that back. He was actually taken in 31 main event leagues. That's amazing to me. I don't know if he's still rostered in that many of them. I have to kind of look that up, figure out his roster level. But I got caught off guard a little bit by his rate of rostership at the draft. So We'll see. And I got called. I also got caught off guard by how quickly he got called up. But then you look at the injuries. No Nick. No Gonzalez, Marco Gonzalez. That's the big one. But Marjavicius is hurt, and now LJ Newsom's out, and it looks like he's going to be out for a long time too.
Yeah, and I think everything we see with Gilbert in the minors is excellent. It's exactly the resume you want to see. Tons of strikeouts, strikeout rate north of 31%, just walking just about 6% of opposing batters. It's exactly the resume of somebody who should come up and be quite good right away. Decent chance for, I think, an above average strikeout rate to go along with, you don't assume an amazing ERA and whip right away, but at least you got that backbone of a decent amount of whiffs.
Yeah, that's right. That's right. So how aggressive are you going to be this weekend? Does it depend on how he does tonight, or are you like for fab betting over the weekend? Are you going to be pretty aggressive?
I think I wouldn't mind. I mean, again, it's exactly the kind of pitcher you want. I like those high strikeout guys. That's definitely how I build my rosters. A lot of the time I'm near the top in strikeouts and low middle in ERA, because strikeouts are an area where they tend to stick. Guys don't tend to randomly break out in strikeouts. They don't tend to randomly drop.
Right.
And it seems to be every reason he can get a fair amount of whiffs, which means I'm happy riding through some of his struggles. So I think quite happy to be pretty aggressive with him.
All right. Very good. Other big news, Arizona, unfortunately, 2 injuries. The big one being Zach Gallen going on the IL. Now, there is a note from him this morning suggesting it's not all that tragic, but frankly, I'm concerned. This is a second trip. It's an elbow. They said it's a quote unquote minor sprain. I always hate seeing that because, it's easy to say. A sprain is a tear, even though it's a very minor sprain. I guess a lot of pitchers have those at times, but Gallen is in a short no-throw period followed by a second round of imaging to assess healing. I don't know. It seems to me we're going to be out without him for at least a little while.
Yeah, I mean, when you give me the word minor and you also give me the word UCL in the same note, I think UCL stands out a whole lot more. So the downside risk here is pretty huge. I guess the only upside is it's presumably unrelated to the hairline fracture in his forearm was what it was at the start of the year. So at least, it's not a recurrence. But yeah, I'm not placing a ton of stock in the word minor there. Obviously, you got to hold him until he gets through that no-throw period. We will get an update. It's not going to be forever. And if the news is positive there, I think you'll be happy to have held on to him, but I wouldn't do so optimistically at all.
So going forward, someone wants to, you decide you don't want to take the chance. What sort of pitcher are you hoping to get in return if you offer up Gallen for trade? Would Charlie Morton get the job done?
That doesn't seem bad to me. Somebody who doesn't have the same ceiling. I don't think Morton's ERA is great this year, but I think last I checked his peripherals were more or less fine. So you're getting a guy who definitely would go several rounds below him. I'm probably thinking 5 to 7 rounds below where Gallen went in the draft. Seems like a fair place to start.
Right.
You're probably targeting somebody who I guess can afford to sit on him. So find that team who has enough pitching who would love to get Gallen down the stretch to really make a charge. So it's vaguely Morton seems fair-ish to me.
Or you find maybe a struggling veteran like Dylan Bundy, maybe. You're not going to be able to get someone that's flying high. That's the thing. Right. You're going to have to take a discounted rate on somebody if you're going to do a trade. I just think it's a fascinating candidate. I had a chance to trade him in the RotoWire Staff Keeper League. Chris List made a pretty good offer for him, and I decided I don't really want to sell. Oops, probably should have sold. But but then again, never know. I mean, it's now obviously I don't have any sort of leverage with him.
Yeah, I mean, how often does that come up with pitchers? It seems like pretty often the correct move was probably to have sold, but you gotta keep Gallen if you got him. I mean, the numbers he can produce are the kind that you're building a team around, so it's tough to just get rid of that.
We're recording today's podcast ahead of the XM broadcast. I'm sure he's going to remind me of that when we do the XM show today, but so it goes. Teammate Christian Walker went on the IL as well with an oblique injury, and this second trip to the IL for Walker. It's a down ballot corner infielder, and it's been a tough start for him, but I have him in a handful of leagues. This is a blow to me. It does open up more playing time for Pavin Smith, who's actually had a pretty decent start this season.
Yeah, Smith was a guy unique for first baseman that he wasn't supposed to have a ton of power, right? And he hasn't shown a ton, only slugging 441. That's fine. And he was always supposed to be making pretty good contact. So 276 average seems like something that could stick. I don't think he's an exciting player, but I think he's definitely rosterable in outside of shallow leagues.
Right. It's just you got to try to find yet another corner. We've had so many hitter injuries. That's the thing that gets me. We expect the pitcher injuries, and everyone is like, okay, you're going to have very limited innings. We're going to see pitchers go down. We've seen more hitter injuries than we see pitcher injuries. We saw that the big one was like Dustin May, but in season with Tommy John. But we haven't seen too many that we've had to zero out. Last year we had Thor, we had Chris Sale, we had Severino. 1 week into the season we had Justin Verlander. I don't feel like we've had that scourge, that long array of pitcher injuries. We have, on the other hand, had some massive hitter injuries.
Yeah, I guess some of that might just be how much the Tommy John last year was concentrated in the very top tier. There's probably a fair amount of Tommy Johns for guys that none of us were thinking about anyway. But I think there's a big point there is just how little we actually know about the routines of these athletes and how much last year throwing everything off really screws things up. I mean, we knew it was going to, but nobody was going to be able to predict exactly how. I don't think anybody should be surprised that there's a ton of injuries, but I don't think we should have gone into this thinking we knew all that much. So
right,
and that even should carry over into next year. I mean, we don't know what's the effect of going from 60 games to 162 games. Maybe that doesn't, really hit you until a year after that. So I think it's going to be quite some time before the effects of last year's shortened season are completely gone.
Right. We have some breaking news out of Philly, your beloved Phillies. The Phillies have placed JT Realmuto on the COVID-related IL. Called up Rafael Marchand from Lehigh Valley. Now, we went with every COVID IL trip. We don't know. Did he test positive? Is it a close contact? What's the situation there? With the Padres, we found out pretty quickly on Tatis and Myers that they actually had tested positive. The other players were close contacts, but we don't know the news yet on Realmuto, but he's already been kind of banged up anyhow too.
Yeah, that's a weird one. When you said IL for Realmuto, I was assuming it would be related to that knee. He took a really hard foul ball off the inside of his knee a couple of days ago and hasn't played since. He's the second guy in recent days, I'm forgetting the other one, who was banged up with something and then ended up on the COVID IL instead. I wonder, is it, the best case scenario here is they're like, you're not going to play for 2 or 3 days. Go get your shot now. We'll put you on the COVID IL while you recover. Obviously, no proof that that's what's happening, but I sure hope it's that rather than a positive test. It would make at least some sense.
Yeah, well, that's the thing. Is like with Corbin Burns, there was a conspiracy theory going around that they were trying to manipulate, his innings by, just shutting him down for a couple, for that, and also getting the extra arm for that 4-game Dodger series. But then he came out and said, "Yeah, I actually tested positive." Now, I think you have to take him at his word. I mean, I think we are all too ready to believe conspiracy theories. I think the burden of proof is on the accuser and not the burden to disprove a conspiracy theory.
Yeah, definitely wouldn't assume anything here. Hopefully we find out within a day or so. Hopefully we find out that it's just a brief absence for him because the Phillies definitely need him.
Yeah, they absolutely do. So we'll see. Burns, by the way, is returning today. Excited to see that. But I wonder if he'll be limited in his number of innings he throws with his first game back.
Over under half a walk for Burns tonight.
I'll take the over. I'm going to be, it's the couple weeks layoff. What a remarkable number. He hasn't walked anybody. Garrett Cole has only walked 3 batters this season. Seen some really astounding numbers this year.
Yeah, I think it was 56 strikeouts without a walk or something for Cole. And I think Burns could hit that today I think he's at 49-0, something like that. 48 strikeouts, 0 walks. So another one of the same starts. He could be right up there again.
Yeah, I flew that L flag on Burns early because one of the 3 poles of my tripod of concerns with him was the walk rate. 10% walk rate last year, and 0% is an improvement. I think he fixed that part.
Yeah, tough to get much better than that.
Right. So we'll see about that. But the one thing that was the other concern was workload, and the third was just schedule, that he's been able to feast on all Central Division teams. And he still kind of has. He missed the Dodgers, but we'll see. They're 20-17 now with all these injuries. They've had as many injuries as anybody. They're still playing some pretty good ball.
Yeah, it's nothing new for the Brewers, right? I mean, Craig Counsell's been making the most of a team that, I mean, they haven't been bad, but they haven't been a top-tier team, yet they keep making it and they go on runs. They really seem like they can squeeze the most out of, decent at best talent there.
Yeah, that's right. Jose Urquidy left yesterday's start after 3.2 innings with posterior shoulder discomfort. He was pitching a gem against the Angels, 3 2/3 innings, but his velocity was down in his last couple of throws. And of course, that's worrisome. Anytime you hear shoulder, you're like, oh my gosh, and I'm right there. I'm pretty concerned.
Yeah, he does have something of an injury history. I don't think it's shoulder. I guess last year it was the COVID IL, which was the reason why he missed time. But I think he's got he has Tommy John
before.
Yeah, but no shoulder issues. But it's still worrisome even without that history. He was, I think, merely decent this year. Good ERA, but not totally backed by the peripherals. He really just wasn't striking anybody out. Or 18.6% strikeout rate, not walking guys, but not a high ground ball rate either, actually below 30%. So it wasn't necessarily paying anybody back. A lot of people were quite high on him, I think, heading into the year. But now, who knows when we'll see him next.
In draft season, I argue that strikeouts might come back. It was partially because of COVID, partially because of opponents. But maybe I was just wish casting a little bit there too. We'll see.
Right. I mean, even the good version of Urquidy was only about a league average strikeout rate. But when you combine that with good control, that's still a good pitcher for where he was going. We'll see what he does if and when he comes back. But I am at least medium down on him based on what we've seen so far.
Sure. Final news note, Adalberto Mondesi is beginning his rehab assignment finally. They've been kind of taking it really slow with this oblique injury. We're good 6 weeks into the season. This is usually the back end of any sort of estimate on how long an oblique injury is supposed to keep you out. And the way that this happened so late and, basically after draft season was over the day before the season started, he was drafted everywhere and he was drafted high everywhere.
Yeah, he's the type of guy who there's always going to be someone in every league who's incredibly high on him. I mean, remember how awful he was for 3/4 of last year?
Right.
It was like on base percentage near like 200. He was the worst hitter in the league. And then all it took was 2 weeks to fully get the hype train all the way back on. Obviously, you love what he can do on the base pass. I tend to not end up with these kind of guys because there's always someone who's just obsessed with this kind of profile. I'm always worried about, if they can't hit enough, they're not going to steal. But probably he's going to hit. It's just there's probably few higher variance players out there. So I think if you're somebody who's been stashing him, he could be your ticket up the standings, or he could, help you in one category while tanking you everywhere else.
Yeah, that's right. And hopefully, we'll see. These stolen bases come in bunches too. So he could do nothing for a month and then dominate for a month. I mean, that's pretty much what he did last year. And he did the same in 2018 too. So, in his breakout. So, it's kind of interesting to see what's going to happen with him, but we'll see. One other note on JT Real Muto, Matt Gelb, who covers the Phillies for The Athletic. The note he passed on said, Phillies will have a DH this weekend in Dunedin, which will reduce pinch hitting situations, but they need an extra man today because of the short bench. They do that by putting Real Muto on the COVID-related list. That seems pretty cynical to me.
Yeah, I mean, doesn't there have to be something COVID-related to go on the COVID-related list? It makes sense from a roster perspective, but
so maybe he really did get the second. Maybe
right.
He just got the second vaccination. I mean, that's the charitable explanation.
Right. That's what I would tell him to do if he was going to sit for a couple of days anyway. I hope that's all this is. But
right. And that way they don't have to put him on the IL period, so they can just put him on the short-term one there. So we'll see. I don't know. It just seems pretty hanky, but we'll find out.
Yeah, conveniently timed for sure.
Before we move on to talk the barometer and other issues with Erik, a quick note from our sponsors at Blue Wire. All right, that was just for the audio listeners only. The video guys, you got to skip those two ads. But Here we are. We're back. Erik Halterman is my guest. You can follow Erik on Twitter at Erik_Halterman. You can see it on the screen there. Erik, you write the barometer for us. It's a fun little who's rising, who's falling. So I thought we'd take a tour of some of this here, some of the players you mentioned, and just jump into that here. But actually, before we do that, talk about your preamble this week is, hey, 35 games last year was half the season, more than half the season. Here we're not even at the quarter mark. It is pretty refreshing to realize what a long haul of a baseball season is.
Yeah, I mean, I think last year we were all in such a scramble just to get through the year that, we were aware that it was weird. But I think now that we're getting some of that perspective again, I think looking back, it's just crazy to realize that, at this point last year, we're heading down the home stretch already. I definitely prefer this version a whole lot more.
Yeah, absolutely. John Means was awesome in his no-hitter against the Mariners. He was awesome against the Mets in his subsequent start. Often you see guys coming off a no-hitter and, okay, they're not that sharp. They have a shorter outing. And he did have a shorter outing. I think he threw 74 pitches. But he was super efficient. He got through 6 innings on those 74 pitches.
Yeah, and I think the interesting thing for Means, or about Means for me, is sort of the archetype he represents. I think a lot of the times pitchers who've just had a year or two in the league, the ones that are exciting are the guys who strike out the world and have really shaky control. I think real life teams and fantasy players look at those guys and say, well, I'll grab him. I know he can do something. And man, if he just learns where the ball's going, he's going to be amazing. We don't generally see these guys who started out like Means, where they've always had good control, but they didn't really strike out anybody. I mean, that looks like a career back-end starter. It's pretty rare to suddenly learn how to strike people out. And this year, at least through his no-hitter, he was at 30% strikeout rate, which is, if not top tier, certainly the second tier. There are some guys like that. It's just harder to, find them. But I think he's doing a good job proving that, that really is a path to success, and we should make sure we stay open to that sort of player.
Right. One of the things I like to look for with guys that have such a great changeup like he does is the velocity, and the velocity picked up with him. And I probably should have been more on top of that. I didn't have an aggressive enough projection on him. And as a consequence, I'm enjoying this breakout from afar. He is not on my watch, unfortunately.
Yeah, I think I only ended up with one share. I think I mostly, again, like I said earlier, I tend to build strikeout heavy rotations. I'm doing exactly what I said everybody else does. So I tend to miss out on this kind of guy. But when it works, it certainly is a pretty huge boost.
How many leagues are you in?
I have 10 this year, one best ball, 9 other. I think that's my career high, trying to ramp things up.
Okay. I'm trying to scale back, and I'm at 17. So I'll give you some tips on that, how to add leagues against your will. I'm pretty good at that.
We'll meet in the middle next year.
Yeah. And the problem is, like, which league am I going to cut? I enjoy this league too much. I'm not going to cut out my NFBC leagues. I'm not going to cut out my industry leagues. I actually did cut out one. The FSGA league I didn't do this year. Clay took that over. And good for Clay. He deserves a little bit more exposure anyhow. He's awesome. So that's great. But nobody cares about how many leagues I'm in. So let's move on. Giancarlo Stanton is hitting the ball hard. Every time I turn around, he's smoking a ball. And the thing is, you shouldn't turn around on him. You should be watching him closely so you don't get smoked. Yeah,
I mean, he was picked outside the top 100 this year just because who knows how many games you're going to get out of him. But he has had healthy years in the past. I think he had a couple in a row where he was playing close to 162 games. So it's not like it's completely unheard of. And if you happen to get him the year where he's on, he's not just a merely good hitter. He's an absolute top-tier hitter. Nobody hits the ball even close to how hard he hits it. He's always atop the exit velocity, hard hit leaderboards. The only guy who is even in the same ballpark in Aaron Judge. And they're collectively a full tier ahead of everybody else. I think when I checked the other day, the gap between Stanton and whoever was in third in terms of average exit velocity was the same as the gap between third and 30th or something like that. So
that's amazing.
Just an entire tier above everybody else.
Yeah. And he's making a lot more contact than Judge too, for that matter. So he's 26%. And the funny thing is we're saying he's making a lot more contact. He's still striking out 26.5% of the time. That used to be, I'm old enough to remember when that was a high strikeout rate. That's actually a good rate for him.
Yeah, I mean, how many points have we shot up just in the last 5 years? I think
It's
every
insane.
couple years it's a full tick. But I believe Stanton strikeout rate, even if you don't adjust for ERA, which I guess given the rate at which strikeout rate is exploding, you practically have to count 2012 as a different era. But even if you don't adjust for ERA, I think it's his second best. I think he had one season where he was under 24%, but almost all the time he's in the upper 20s. So more contact than ever and as hard contact as ever. I don't think there's much you can really do with him. You either have him or you don't. I don't think maybe somebody has him and is looking to get out now while he's at his peak value. But I think it's mostly just a case of if you happen to take a chance on him this year, great. I mean, you got a first, second, third round player.
Yep.
In the 6th, 7th, 8th, something like that.
Yeah, that's right. Next player on your upgrade list on the barometer, and you can check that out, rotowire.com/try. You get a free 10-day trial. Erik does the barometer every week up on RotoWire. You mentioned Wander Franklin, and you very rarely post on a prospect. Yeah, we all know who he is, but the fact is, it looks to me like he's going to get called up sooner rather than later. Given his great start, given the Rays are kind of slowly starting offensively, Willy Adames is a slow starter offensively. He was available in one of my 5 NFBC leagues, and he went for $209 in FAB last week, just because he was drafted and then dropped in one of my online championships. So that just shows a week before you could have got him for $1. That last week, once he started playing, $209.
Yeah, I wonder if it should have been a lot more than $1 2 weeks ago. I actually grabbed him in TGFBI. Somebody had to drop him, and I spent a full quarter of my budget on him. But I'm perfectly comfortable with that. I think second place was 180 something. So I guess
that's a good bid then.
I wasted really 70, but I'm
no, the higher you get though with that, I mean, yeah, you would love to see second place 249, but the fact is someone else is bidding triple digits that's a good bid. That's a healthy bid. I'd have no problem with that. That's not wasting as far as I'm concerned.
Yeah, and I think he's one of the few guys where he has the potential to be a star. I mean, I think people are expecting from Kelenic. It's not going to be the exact same shape of production from Franco, but it could easily be just that good. And I've got a team that's doing great in TGFBI this year. It's sitting in the back of the top 10 overall, and he could be the guy that takes me to top. Would rely on some health from Jacob deGrom there, but I think I need to be making that kind of move to
get slot were you drafting out of? What slot were you drafting out of there?
6. And I looked at the top 10 overall, and it's littered with guys drafting 6.
Yeah.
But that was, I guess, before Jacob deGrom injury. I bet there's a lot of guys with deGrom and not all the top guys who've missed time like Soto and Tatis. Right. So far, 5-6 seems to be the place you wanted to be.
Yeah, you either get, early on you might have gotten deGrom, and later on I still got Cole in the main at 6, the one time I drafted out of that slot. And Tatis, the funny thing, at least with Tatis, he's done stuff when he's healthy. Granted, his batting average hasn't been great, but he's run and he's hit for power, so you live with that now. This extra time that he's missing is going to hurt a lot, but that's for sure. But yeah, I think 6 has been a nice little sweet spot. That's for sure. Who else is secret to your success there?
I did well with some late round pitching, I think. Trevor Rogers is on that team, so I think that's more or less all I need to say. I mean, every Trevor Rogers team has been excellent.
Are you required as a RotoWire staffer to at least have wanted to have drafted Trevor Rogers? Because I think I know Clay and James are high on him. You're high on him. I've got him in a few leagues. Yeah,
he was shooting all the way up all of our roundtable rankings. I think I had a bidding war with Clay in one of our leagues. I think it might have been Stake League, where I think we ended up in the high teens for a guy who was mostly going for maybe 3 to 5. Obviously, the hype caught on. It's not like we were the only people in the world on him. The hype was building throughout March, but he's delivered in every possible way.
Well, it was beautiful early on how cheaply he was going. And then it just with each successive dominant spring training start, you're like, okay, I'm going to have to pay up for him now. Do you joined the RotoWire Staff Keeper League and my NL Only Midnight Madness League. Do you have him in either of those 2 leagues?
Where do I have Rogers? Let me check. I've got 3 shares of Rogers. I've got him in TGFBI. I've got him in a home league and another dynasty league, but I missed out on him in the other RotoWire leagues because probably due to Clay.
Yeah, and as a matter of fact, Staff Keeper League, He's on the Diamond Dogs, Clay's team there. Of course he is.
There you go.
You're doing well in that league, and you're doing well in the NL Home Keeper League that I joined, that you joined this year. In fact, you're in first place in the NL one. What's the secret there? How are you beating us?
Yeah, that's an interesting one, especially because I wasn't even aware that it was OPS instead of runs, and I'm winning OPS. Not that trying to have good hitters in general doesn't lead to winning OPS, but clearly there's been some good luck involved in that one. It was fun to join that league. I was looking for some only league experience. That was one of the gaps that I had. Had some late pitching workout. One of the unusual things I did there is I had the first pick in that reserve/minors draft because the team I took over was last the previous year. And I did not take a prospect. I took JT Brubaker because I figured in an only league, just having pitchers you were happy with all year is going to be a huge key. And he was a guy that stood out to me as he definitely should have gone in the auction. I didn't think we'd get this from him, but he's a guy I think I had him in half my leagues because last year he was average or better in strikeout rate, ground ball rate, and walk rate. I was not elite in any of those areas, but I think it was like 15, 17 pitchers who threw at least as many innings that could say that they just had no weaknesses in any of those areas. And it's mostly aces, Nathan Eovaldi randomly, and then also JT Brubaker. So a guy with no weaknesses like that definitely was interesting. So I took a chance on him rather than a prospect, and I've gotten way more than I could have expected from a reserve round in an only league there.
Yeah, absolutely. That's worked out really well. Sometimes you find those scores a little bit there. I don't think I did this year. I've got all the injuries though too, so it's hard to say. Including Christian Yelich as a keeper. I lost the league last year by 0.5 point on the last day of the season. I'm not bitter and holding on to that at all. But it was kind of the end of the run. I had a cheap Trevor Story that was on his last year of his contract, a couple other ones. So I'm kind of stuck in that middle there of like, do I go for it again or do I really start rebuilding? And I think I'm leaning into the latter. So we may have to work a trade out sometime later this season, if not on air today.
Yeah, we can talk. Looks like you're winning ERA and I'm bad in ERA. So yeah, give me whoever's doing that. We'll figure something out.
Yeah. All right. I've got an expiring Jack Flaherty that might look good on you. So we'll see.
Certainly wouldn't hurt.
Yeah. We'll see what sort of prospect I can get out of that. A couple other things I want to talk about with Erik's barometer. You can check out on RotoWire.com. And you can kind of check out, and I'll see if I can pull up the screen here and you guys can take a look at it here. But let's see if I can go ahead and do that. You can see Erik's article up on RotoWire.com, his risers and fallers every single week. I'm going to scroll really fast, so it makes it hard. But you mentioned JT Brubaker and Tyler Anderson, both guys that are players that are off to a great year. And you look at them and you look at the Pirates, finding any sort of value out of them is tough. But the two starting pitchers and Richard Rodriguez are definitely off to great seasons.
Yeah, and the Pirates with that pitcher-friendly park, you don't have to be that good to be at least a moderately interesting pitcher there. I guess you have to be better than whatever Mitch Keller has turned into. But you get these guys who would ordinarily be pretty bland mid-rotation back-end starters. I don't think anybody expects frontline performance from Tyler Anderson going forward.
Right.
But he was basically not drafted at all. He was a complete afterthought. I mean, when you're mediocre and spending most of your career in Colorado, people tend to forget about you. But apparently when you're mediocre in pitching in Pittsburgh and then you become slightly better than mediocre, he's completely playable. His strikeout rate's still below average, but it's close. He's got good control, 7% walk rate, something like that, about league average ground ball rate. So there's nothing special here, but given the park, given the NL Central isn't all that tough. I think that's one thing people may have overcorrected on heading into this year is they saw the numbers from the Central Division last year, and I think people may have regressed them too hard because these guys still are playing in the NL Central. They're not playing 2/3 of their games against them, but in an ordinary year, we still are excited for these guys who pitch in weak divisions. And so I think that's still a boost for both Brubaker and Anderson.
Yeah. I mean, let's face it, fading NL Central guys got you to avoid the Luis Castillo disaster. Right. Kenta Maeda has been a disappointment. But it also means you missed out on Brandon Woodruff. You missed out on Corbin Burns if you overcorrected for that too. So it's 6 1 half dozen another. So we'll see. And we'll see how this one plays out too, because like you said, they faced a lot of Central Division teams early on, especially. So especially in the NL side of things, I know that's true. So we'll see what that changes. What changes the summer brings as far as that goes. Woodruff looked pretty darn good yesterday against the Cardinals. Had that one bad pitch. Tyler O'Neill got him, so he didn't get the win, unfortunately for him. But pitched really well otherwise.
Yeah, I mean, he was right in the middle of that second tier of starters during draft season. I think there's every reason to believe he's going to be there again next year. I don't know if he's got enough to take that jump into the first round. I think Corbin Burns might vault over him. There's a chance if Burns keeps going the way he's going that we're talking about him alongside the Shane Biebers of the world next year. But I think Woodruff absolutely has justified his spot and should continue to.
Let's talk about some fallers. A couple of guys on Cleveland, starting off at the top. Andres Jimenez and Tristan McKenzie. Let's talk Jimenez because this is a guy who's had some serious draft helium. By the time the main event drafts rolled around, he was going in the top 100 in a lot of leagues.
Yeah, I mean, people, I think we're right to expect pretty good things. Last year, he showed plenty of speed and respectable average in power. And that's, given how much people love speed, given how rare speed is, I think there was every reason to like that. And once there was news that Ahmed Rosario was mostly going to be playing center or at least trying the outfield, it sure seemed like Jimenez was going to be close to the everyday shortstop. He has had playing time. It's mostly a platoon role. He's not sitting against every lefty, but it's basically a platoon between him and Rosario. But, man, he looks a lot closer to a demotion than a everyday role. He's just an absolutely anemic batting line, hitting below 200 last I checked, on base in the low 200s, no power, striking out way more than last year, not really walking at all. And there's just nothing to like in the line. He's young. He might just not be ready yet, unfortunately.
Yeah, you might be right about that. Speaking of fallers, got a question in the chat room here from Alfonso asked, should I start Luis Castillo tonight? I think he can bounce back. He's definitely been a faller. Guy that had a horrible outing against Cleveland on Saturday. He said he could not get a feel for his changeup. He only had one swing and miss with this changeup, and that is his money pitch. What say you on Luis Castillo tonight and going forward?
Yeah, I mean, his strikeouts have just evaporated. They've been cut almost in half. He did everything you want to see last year. He combined a strikeout rate north of 30% with a ground ball rate in the high 50s. I mean, the few guys do both of those things. He still has a solidly above average ground ball rate this season. And he's actually has his career best walk rate, but that might be because everybody's already hit the ball. His strikeout rate's down to 16.8%. And that comes with a velocity drop, still high, but down nearly a tick and a half from 97.5 to 96.1 is what I'm seeing. So, and
that's just the fastball. The changeup's going slower. The slider's going slower too. You're right. I until like the last outing, I still thought maybe he's a buy low. I definitely wouldn't use him in Coors Field tonight. I guess if you are really desperate, and you have no, you're like in a head-to-head league and you're just going to be short on starts, I would use him. I typically would not though. I don't have that problem because there's other guys I like better in the second round than him. So I always ended up with either Woodruff or Zach Gallen, or others in that range. Although Gallen was at the lower end of that range. But the point is, a lot of second round pitchers have been pretty darn good too. That's the opportunity cost. If you went with Castillo, you missed out on so many other good options.
Yeah, definitely. I think I ended up with a bit of him, but luckily not a ton. I think there's an interesting question about Coors this year. This has got to be the weakest Rockies lineup that I can remember.
Yeah,
I know it's still Coors Field, but I definitely care about that a lot more for Rockies pitchers who have to face actually good lineups. I think the Rockies are just anemic. I mean, they're down there with the Tigers, and I think nobody else. I think you obviously have to treat it as moderately scary, but when you're facing, Josh Fuentes and whatever this
game-winning hit yesterday.
Yeah,
come on, do not defame don't diminish the work that Josh Fuentes is doing. No, I heard this the other day, and it was relayed to me. So I can't verify the exact number, but that Rockies at home were still averaging over 6 runs per game at Court. They're just so anemic on the road.
Right.
Now, it's typically they should be averaging over 7 at home because it's Coors Field. But I'm still on the fence. I probably wouldn't start him, but I get why people who are invested in him being your first top starting pitcher, you just start him and hope that the only way you win is if he lives up to his billing. So I don't know. Tough call on that one there. Good question. Thank you, Alfonso. We'll talk more about Castillo, I'm sure, going forward. Before we move on, 2 quick announcements. One, WynnBET is signing on to be a sponsor with us, and we're thankful for their business. We don't have a copy from them yet on a good read, but please, if you're looking to do sports betting and you can do so in your state, and WynnBET is available, please check them out. We'll have more information on how to use their services going forward. The other is our friends at Vivid Seats. The world is coming back, and NFL season is upon us. The schedule release happened yesterday, May 12th. If you're like me, you're looking to go see the action live, head on over to Vivid Seats, the ultimate go-to source for live events. From the biggest concerts and games to the hottest theater and comedy shows, Vivid Seats makes it easy for you to discover your favorite event, find your seat, gain entry, and make new memories. Just download the app, choose your city, and get access to the largest selection of tickets on the games and performances you love, including the NFL, MLB, NBA, and more. For a limited time, Vivid Seats is giving our listeners 10% of your ticket up to $30 max. $30 max. Just use the promo code RotoWire when you check out. Every purchase is backed by its 100% buyer guarantee, and you'll even earn cash back with the Vivid Seats rewards program. Vivid Seats, getting you into the game. I'm Jeff Erickson here with Erik Halterman. You can follow Erik on Twitter at Erik_Halterman. That's ERIK. Erik, you are a big Phillies guy, right? Did I get that right?
Yep. Born in the Philly area. I actually lived in Toronto for 10 years as a kid. So my first favorite team was the Sean Green, Carlos Delgado, Roy Halladay Blue Jays.
Okay.
But it didn't really keep up with them when I moved back to the Philly area when I was 11. So mostly a Phillies fan.
Do you have like a secondary interest? Like, okay, I'm happy when the Blue Jays do well, or do you just not care about them anymore?
Yeah, definitely. But I'm not following them. If there's no particularly interesting game on MLB.TV, I'll prioritize the Blue Jays over anything else, over a neutral game. But basically just a Phillies fan at this point.
Gotcha. Okay, so let's talk Phillies. They spent a lot of the offseason trying to revamp their bullpen, trying to add a lot of velocity. I thought Archie Bradley was going to be the closer at one point. Nope, it's still Hector Neris. Neris has had some bumpy games, but had a clean outing yesterday. What's your thought there, starting in the bullpen?
Yeah, I think Neris gets sometimes underrated. I think he's totally fine. I don't think he would close for a true contender, but I do think he would be an 8th inning guy on a true contender. And I think he's perfectly fine to close for a team, that's not one of the top 10 teams in the league. Most of his seasons are quite good. He has some real duds. He was demoted in the middle of 2018 and finished with an ERA north of 5. But he's got closer strikeout rates regularly in the high 20s or above 30%. This year he's at 29.2, which is up a few ticks from last year. So I don't think he's by any means an elite closer, but I don't think he's somebody we should be looking at as, on the brink of losing his job at all times.
Yeah. Jose Alvarado is throwing hard, but he's also got a 150 whip. I look at him as, he is a threat, but then again, he's walked 9 guys in 10 2/3.
Yeah, I think the Phillies have to be thrilled with what they got, though. They traded away Garrett Clevenger, who had thrown one single MLB appearance, and I think is actually older than Alvarado. That's the thing about Alvarado. He broke in so young. He's still just 26, 25 even. And I think they have to be happy with what they're getting. I mean, they knew he doesn't have good control. He's walking nearly 18% of opposing batters, but he's striking out enough guys. All of his outings are adventures, but I think as a 7th, 8th inning guy, I think he's good enough for that. Okay.
I didn't want to spend too much time in the bullpen, but those are the 2 guys we're talking about. A hot button issue for them has been the outfield production. Obviously, Harper is Harper, but center field has had some huge droughts. Odubel Herrera is now kind of taking over a little bit more often. in center. And then left field, Andrew McCutchen is off to a pretty bad start, not just offensively. Every time I look up and see a Phillies game, he's struggling in left field too. And it's kind of sad to see because I like Kutch a lot, but he seems like he's losing a step out there in the field too.
Yeah, there was the thing about him getting an eye exam a week or two ago.
Yeah.
They were that worried about his defense that they thought something was up with his eyes. I don't remember seeing if there was a verdict there, but I do think it actually corresponded to some better performances. He's got a hit in most of his recent games. He's dragged his WRC plus up above 100. You want more than that from a guy who's a bat first corner outfielder, but he's always had the elite walk rate, which I guess makes the eye concerns a little bit weird, given that we use the word eye to describe a guy's ability to take a walk. But that's as high as ever. Power's declining a bit. I mean, with age, you'd expect that. And his batting average was already going. I think it'll end up above 224 where it is now, but I wouldn't expect much above 250 with only modest power there. So he's a better real life player in that he still walks a lot. If you're in an OBP league, I think he's still fine. But I mean, this is clearly a player in decline. I think there's no doubt about that.
Yeah. Is there any help on the way? Is there anybody in the system that get called up? I mean, they've gone with Moniak for a while, and he's been a maniac and sent back down. Kingery is up and down. It seems like constantly. Roman Quinn, shockingly enough, is hurt. Hazley's been away from the team for a while. Is there someone in the farm system I'm overlooking? Is there someone that could give them help later this season?
Not really, unless you're a Moniak guy, and that's kind of the most frustrating thing about being a Phillies fan right now is the team spent all its assets just to get to where it is, which is a perennial 500 team. Team never really had a good minor league system. Maybe, I guess, when Aaron Nola was still a prospect, he alone was enough to get them in the top half. But I guess people like J.P. Crawford a while ago, but that hasn't really worked. But there's never been this restocking, even throughout the rebuild. It was never, here's this massive wave of guys who are definitely going to turn this team around, so that we just kind of had to limp along getting, one Aaron Nola, one Alec Baum every 4 or 5 years, and then a whole bunch of not much. So if there's help on the way, it has to be Mickey Moniak, I think, in terms of guys arriving this year. And
right,
I'm not expecting above average performance from Moniak this year. He at least is back in the mix, as he is probably a major leaguer. I think for first 2-3 years of his minor league career, he was looking like, is this guy even going to reach AAA? I mean, he just couldn't hit. No power, not even all that great contact. He's back to looking like somebody who can be maybe a second division starter out there. Definitely at least an adequate fourth outfielder. That might be good enough to be the Phillies center fielder this year. But not a lot of exciting top level prospects.
And when you're the first overall pick in the draft, I mean, that's tough. I mean, the opportunity cost of who else you could have drafted is really tough. And just, it's very rare that you get the draft with that sort of premium. You paid a price. You really had an awful season the year before to deal with that. And to not be able to cash in on that is super frustrating. And that's a hard thing to recover from.
Yeah, and that was a year where there was no clear top guy, although some of the guys have worked out. The Phillies were, I think, intentionally going for the cheapest of the top tier options. They were betting big on a pitcher in the second round whose name escapes me at the moment because he blew out his elbow and I think has done nothing. So the idea was, let's get, unfortunately we didn't get the first pick in the Bryce Harper year. Let's take the fifth best guy and then a guy who should have gone in the 20s. And, when that guy blows out his arm, it looks a whole lot worse. But can't say it's worked out well. Can't say much has worked out really on the draft and development side for the Phillies.
Yeah. What do you do? What's their move? How can they make a push? Because you have so much invested in the now, with the big Harper contract, you got Nola, you signed Wheeler, Eflin's actually kind of living up to expectation. But yeah, you've got Chase Anderson and Vince Velasquez as your 4-5. I mean, it's really tough to kind of put together a real contender with that and their outfield problems.
Yeah, too bad they traded away Nick Pivetta right before Nick Pivetta is maybe okay, but I think as a Phillies fan, I'm not expecting Nick Pivetta to stay okay for all that long. Yeah, I mean, Spencer Howard should show up eventually, but he's his star hurt with a pretty mediocre last year. They said his conditioning was bad, which isn't really what you want to hear, but there was just none of the elite numbers he showed in the minors. It was maybe too big a jump for him. He had not even pitched all that much in Double-A. In 2019, he was just so dominant that people thought he was going to be up and just fully ready to go last year, and that just wasn't at all the case. I think they're managing his innings in the early part of this year. There's certainly a chance he's up by the mid-season and is completely legitimate, at least mid-rotation starter. So that shrinks your rotation problems from 2 to 1. But, you still got 1. Vince Velasquez has had a couple good starts, but he's had a couple good starts for most of the last 5 years, so I'm definitely not considering that spot filled either.
Yeah. Quick heads up. We got about 5 minutes left because I got to jump on and do the XM show, but you do KBO work for us, a Korean baseball organization. I did some projections for them last year. This year I didn't have the bandwidth to be able to do that. Has doing KBO coverage helped your overall game? Like, does it, starting with like basically fresh powder, a whole pool of players you have to learn. How's that affected like your fantasy game?
That's an interesting question. I mean, it's definitely been fun. I mean, that you just don't get that feeling in MLB about discovering players, really. Right. If it's your job to know everything you can about MLB, you probably have an opinion on just about every guy in just about every lineup.
And so does everybody else.
Yeah, exactly. And if there's a guy you have no opinion on, it's because he has no business being there, right? Whereas with KBO, there's, all this history, backstory to learn of all these guys who, they're decent now, but wow, look, this guy's been fantastic for 4 of the last 5 years. There's probably something here. It's definitely made me a better researcher, I think, just so much Googling, tons of Google Translate. I've definitely used a lifetime worth of Google Translate since I started covering KBO last year. And I don't know how much I'm going to take back into MLB because a lot of my work on KBO is just trying to figure out what's knowable about these guys that we have at our fingertips at the MLB level. The ridiculous amount of extensive stats we have. It's kind of it would have helped me a ton if I were a fantasy analyst 15 years ago, 20 years ago. Pre-StatCast, pre-whatever came before StatCast. Just the amount of info that's easily available about the KBO is a lot more limited. So it's a lot more, looking at just strikeout and walk numbers and that kind of thing. But definitely it's been fun just to have that experience of discovery, I think.
Right. And the thing is, this year has got to be tougher. Last year was an oasis. Everybody was watching. Now, ESPN's not giving you that nightly game. Which was awesome. We got to know some good, got to know Eduardo Perez a lot better, got to know Carl Ravitch a lot better, got to know like guys like Daniel Kim, and you got to some really good personalities, but it's a lot different now to try to, it's probably got to be harder to cover because you're not watching every night either.
Yeah, it's definitely a sense in which it's harder. Although I think for me, that's at least been offset by, learning where everything is, finding those Korean language advanced stats that you can hopefully figure out what they mean via Google Translate and that sort of thing. And there's still plenty of good resources out there, like Daniel Kim, like you mentioned, Jiho Yu, who covers sport for Yonhap News in English. It's great information all the time. So I think it's more or less been offset by the fact that at this point I know where to find everything I'm looking for.
That's great. That's cool. Finally, you did a video for us, help people to learn Optimizer. We won't go dig deep into that, but how often are you playing DFS these days?
As often as I can. I probably actually play more KBO DFS because I write our KBO DFS article every single day. Just 5-game slates every day, which I kind of actually prefer those smaller ones because it feels like you can really get a sense for the whole thing, really find the 2 pitchers that you really like. But I play as often as I can, and I use the optimizer plenty. I like using it as more of a brainstorming tool, but I think the great thing about it is that if you have 5 seconds and want players to root for tonight, you just click that button and you've got lineups. I think the best thing about it is you can do that, or you can literally project a point total for every single player in the league and it'll spit out the optimal lineup based on your hand-done projections. So I think that flexibility is great.
I like it. I like it a lot. We'll close with a listener question. LMS, I'm looking to upgrade my third base. I'm thinking of trading JD Martinez for Devers. Current outfield core is Soto, Haniger, and Franmil Reyes. Have to bench one of those three currently with Martinez because it's Yahoo set up. And its current third baseman is Ke'Bryan Hayes. He's worried about him for obvious reasons. He's been out all this time, pushed back. I think that's a pretty fair deal. In fact, if you were drafting at the beginning of the season, Devers was going way ahead of Martinez. And it's not like Devers has been a slug either. Devers has been pretty good in his own right. JD's just been very good. I think this is a good trade. What do you think?
Yeah, that strikes me as fair. I would say I'm not super worried about Hayes. It seems like he is taking the necessary steps. They just threw him on the 60-day IL just to be extremely safe. I think there's reports of him working out all the time. So he's basically fine, but I like the deal anyway.
Yeah, I do too. That wraps it up. What are you working on right now? I guess what day the barometer comes out earlier in the week, obviously. What else where else can people find your work?
Yeah, I got barometer comes out every Monday. I've got daily KBO piece. I do 5 of the 6 pieces a week. I've started doing this will be my second week doing a quick video on waiver wire pickups for SiriusXM and RotoWire. So that'll be coming out probably released tomorrow. So I think those are the main things right now.
Very good. That's going to wrap up today's podcast. We got 2-star starters with Clay and Todd tomorrow. Erik, thanks for joining on this today. It was a lot of fun.
Yeah, thanks for having me on. Hope we do it again sometime.
All right, you bet. Thanks to everybody listening. Please, as always, subscribe and rate and review. We really do appreciate it there. And you can check out our free 10-day trial at RotoWire. Here's the info on that.
Try RotoWire today, free for 10 days. Get our premium tools, rankings, analysis, and breaking news alerts. No credit card required. Go to rotowire.com/try.